Although we are sharing this year's event virtually, the festival is based in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, and we respectfully acknowledge the land on which we gather as the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk, whose culture has been lost forever and can never be recovered. We also acknowledge the island of Uktuhamguk, Newfoundland, as the unceded traditional territory of the Beothuk and the Mi'kmaq, and we acknowledge Labrador as the traditional and ancestral homelands of the Innu of Ntsinan, the Inuit of Nunatsiavut, and the Inuit of Nunatuhavut. We recognize all First Peoples who are here before us, those who live with us now, and the 7 generations to come. As First Peoples have done since time immemorial, we strive to be responsible stewards of the land and to respect the cultures, ceremonies, and traditions of all who call it home. As we open our hearts and minds to the past, we commit ourselves to working in a spirit of truth and reconciliation to make a better future for all.
Hello and welcome to the panel discussion for the film Night Blooms. We're very excited to be here with the St. John's International Women's Film Festival. I know you've seen Land Acknowledgement before this, but I would like to acknowledge that the land that the festival takes place on Uchmaduk, which is was a Mi'kmaq word meaning the land across the sea. And I recommend that anyone take a look at the Indigenous names for where you live, because it connects you to the land, to the people who are the stewards of it. My name is Meg McKay. I'm a comedian and comedy writer and arts administrator, based in Toronto, but currently living in what is now called Halifax, but is Shubucktuk, an unceded Mi'kmaq territory, Mi'kma'ki. And I'm here shooting a television program known as This Hour's 22 Minutes, a very old show that is on Canadian television, and it's fun to do. That I would like, would everyone like to introduce themselves? If we could start with wonderful Steph, if you would like to begin.
Yeah, introduce myself. So my name's Stephanie. I'm the writer and the director of the film you just watched, Night Blooms.
And I'm Jess. I play Carly in that film you just watched.
That's brilliant. I just want to, again, like, I know that you watch the Q&As and you go to all this stuff, and usually like folks are like, oh my God, this was the best movie I've ever seen in my entire life. And they just like fork on everyone's ding dong, and it's a big, huge fest like that. But I genuinely like, on a personal level, just very much connect to a lot of the material in this. And it's so great to see a story told, a female-centric story told through the lens of women, because it's to me a horror film, but you may disagree. But before we get, I think absolutely brilliant. But my first question, I guess, since we're all virtual and we won't be asking questions of the audience, Stephanie, did you want to explain kind of your process behind developing this film?
Yeah, sure. I realize that our demeanor is quite sunny, considering this is it's right after a very bummed out, depressing
Oh yeah,
movie, which is funny, but I like it. Yes, the process of the film. Well, okay, so the I guess writing and inspiration for the story is that I feel like right now we exist in a world that a lot of people are very afraid to talk about some things. And I think that there are a lot of movements that are happening that are really important. The Me Too movement, Black Lives Matters movement, Indigenous issues. There's all kinds of stuff being brought to the forefront in the last few years that really hasn't gotten much attention before, not as much as that should have. Like, I'm a feminist. I'm all for the Me Too movements and all that stuff going on. But I did notice that people do like to put, you just tell me what category. Is this good or bad? Is this black or white? Who's the villain? Who's the hero? And people really get uncomfortable when you challenge that. And I really like making people uncomfortable. So I decided to write a story that was in the world, that kind of with themes of consent and responsibility and sexual power and different things that are uncomfortable topics to discuss, especially right now. And I wanted to make sure that the characters were not 100%, okay, this is a predator who's preying on young women and he's a shitty person, and And I also didn't want to be like, okay, here's a young woman and she's she's a Lolita type and she's trying to take his, ruin his world. And I just thought both of those extreme versions of characters would be quite easy to write. And I wanted to do something that was a little bit more gray area that kind of brought up some questions and uncomfortable feelings in people. So that was my intention. That is what I tried to do with the film.
Oh, I mean, I think it was achieved. The tone and cinematography, again, as I said, it felt like a horror movie to me. But Jessica, did you have any? Can you talk to me a bit about your character and your process of getting into that character?
Yeah. Yeah, Carly was a really different one for me, which was a lot of fun. It was something for me as an actor that I don't normally get to do, because I find that I look innocent and I sound innocent. So when I read the script, I was really excited for that challenge just as an actor. But then the more that Steph and I talked and I kind of read into it, the more I was like, oh, this is like a really fun balancing act kind of challenge where we need to make her likable, but make some interesting decisions so that we judge her, but like not too harshly. Yeah, and it was a lot of fun. She's like 90s grunge badass, which is a side of me that I have never discovered until then. And it was yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. And watching it now, I like, Carly's so cool. Like, how did you make me look like that?
It's funny. I think people will be surprised to hear, if they didn't already know you or working anywhere else, see you speak as Jessica, because you're not like Carly at all.
Not at all.
Like, even your voice is kind of different.
Yeah, like when we were filming, I think I may have told you this, because at the beginning, like when we were doing our rehearsals, you were like, I think that you need to sound older than Laura because I look younger. So I like pitched my voice down a little bit. And then after filming, we were like 3 weeks. I did a musical that normally I'd be able to reach the notes in. And I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure that I've been living in this like different zone with my voice and I need to expand it now. And it was kind of fun. I was like, I've been acting for like 3 weeks in this different character. So
That's very funny. I mean, I think you did a fantastic job, and thank you for sacrificing your voice like one of those old timey Hollywood ladies who like gargled glass and stuff. You're like, I'm suffering for my art. I wanted to bring up so the movie starts with a girl jerking off with a Sharpie pen.
Yeah.
And it sets up the tone for a movie that's going to be like, you are going to feel this. You're going to feel moments. I think I want to, again, not to be like too overly complimenty, but I think maybe audience members can agree with me, is that it is very, you feel the needle going through someone's ear. You feel the slice of the hand when the plate breaks. Like, you live there with those characters. I think what has been done is like a tone has been set that while elements of this are fantastical, certainly, like you ground it really well in the real, so that we feel the more fantastical parts. I wanted to congratulate you on that, because like, oh my god,
Meg, that is so flattering. Thank you. It's so hard to tell when you're making a film if you're achieving any of the goals that you're trying to achieve. It seems like you're so close to it, and it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know, did it work?
Yeah.
So now that the
True.
film is actually starting for the first time to be shown to people, and I'm starting to hear what people are saying, that means a lot to me. Thank you for that
I
compliment.
wanted to take
I
the
think
compliment.
like, so I've watched the film with kind of like different groups of people, and every time I warn them that it might be uncomfortable to watch with me, because you're gonna watch me use a marker on myself in the first 2 minutes of the movie. But I think that like prepares them for the rest of it. Like, you're like, oh, I'm in it now. You know what I mean? Like, this is what we're doing. So if you want to escape, like, now's the time. You just like right off the get-go, it's like, all right, welcome.
If you
This
want
is
to
where we
escape,
are.
now's the time. That's
I
funny.
think that I mean, it's interesting that you bring up the idea of the Lolita, because I've been like thinking a lot, and I just listened to this podcast about Lolita called the Lolita Cast. That's like about like really reframing Lolita as a victim and not as like a femme fatale, as has been demonstrated through film and television and media since then. But it was interesting to me having like some of the male characters like really believing in consent and having that consent be violated by female characters at times, just interesting to me.
No, this is good. These are all the discussions that I really was hoping would come up from people, watching the film, that it's yeah.
And I hesitate to diagnose anyone. Like, you never want to diagnose a character at all, but there's definitely some elements of like borderline personality disorder that are on display here, I found.
With Carly?
With Carly, definitely. Yeah. Like
Well, Carly is very close to me, so that might be. A therapist did once tell me that he thought I had borderline personality disorder.
Oh.
Yeah.
When I was a teenager, when I was literally the age that I wrote this movie about. So that was not intentional, but very, very interesting that you thought that.
They say our true selves really come out in our art, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I should say that this isn't an autobiography. It's not 100% exactly my life, but it's there are some very similar. Some things are directly exactly. I tried to make them exactly what things that I went through, and other things are dramatized and fictional. But yeah, there is a lot of truth in my experiences as a teenager and what Carly does in this movie. Like, I was in a I pretended to be in a high school band when we like literally had one. We played one show. I think we had like 4 songs, and I pretty much just like I would draw in my notebook like where I would stand on stage and what I'd wear and what my guitar would look like and how many stickers should I put on my guitar, and like those were all priorities. Like, who cares about the songwriting? Like, we'll figure that out later. The important thing is being a rock star and being cool. So like I just certainly had to make fun of myself a little bit, like go to those places of shame. I heard this advice from another filmmaker that was teaching a workshop that I took years ago, and she said, if you can go to a place of shame, something that you feel shameful about in your life, and explore that in your art, that will resonate with people. And so I've taken that advice very, I use that as much as I can, because even if it's something that's stupid, like, oh, isn't it embarrassing that I thought I was a rock star and I had no talent or didn't care about songwriting? Like, that's not that important in someone's life. That's not the most embarrassing thing anyone has ever done. But those little things, I think you can put into the story that makes it kind of feel a little bit more genuine. And people go, oh yeah, I remember that kid. I remember that kid in high school.
That leads well into my next question, because I think it was Greta Gerwig that was asked about, or Sofia Coppola. They asked her, they keep asking her about her characters and if they are her. And while, I mean, obviously, there are elements that, like, I had to ask if there were some elements that were, because of how it was created with such tenderness and care. Like, there were elements that felt so real, especially because there's moments in it that are from my life too. Like, I definitely, like, not to go too much into detail, but I'm like, yeah, I get the whole like pretending to be in a band and too much into it and stealing smokes from my mom and stuff like that. Like, that from that era, certainly. But I guess what leads me into this is, so Jessica, what if anything did you bring to Carly as a character? That's yours.
Me? You mean me as Jess?
Yeah, like when you were
Oh.
Carly, like what did you bring? Did you bring anything of yours into that?
Oh. Yeah, Steph and I were talking about this, like, when you're a teenager and you have your first love and it's like this is it, and your world is going to end if you don't have them. And hopefully I'm not alone in saying that everyone's been there, because I certainly have. And I remember that, like, I would have like the biggest fights with my dad because I couldn't see this guy because he like got caught for dealing drugs, and I was like, but he loves me. Yeah. and like things that now are so like I get this cringe at and I will never bring up to my dad again. But in the moment, it's just like it's so real, and you will do absolutely anything to be with this person that you're like meant to be with. And hopefully people get that in like some of the car scenes with Wayne when, you know, she doesn't feel well and all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is not an option. Like my world is ending if you do this. And that totally brought me back to those fights with my dad.
100%. So I guess this leads into another question that I had for you, Jessica, is the there are a lot of like there's a lot of difficult themes in this, and there's a lot of difficult moments that Carly went through. Is there anything that you're in your process that you do to protect yourself so you don't take home some of those intense emotions?
Yeah. Yeah, this is something that I learned. So I think because of the way that I look, I'm always playing like a victim or somebody that's like crying and dying and being kidnapped. So I had to learn early on not to take those things home. So I do this like flip thing, where when I'm in it and like, you know, I'm Carly and the world is a little bit dystopian at the moment, and we're really not having a good time, I can be in it. But as soon as we're done, I'll like flip into Jess mode. And I think that we were kind of talking about this because at the beginning we would try to keep it super chill and quiet on set when I had an emotional scene. And I quickly was like, actually, let's not do that, because then we can go back to normal life. And I know that I'm not Carly and I'm not going through this right now. And I don't take it home with me, which is something that I learned when I accidentally had a panic attack at 12 for my character. Like I got off of set and I was like, I'm feeling really anxious for some reason. And it was because I didn't totally adjust back to, oh, I'm not being abducted by aliens. You know what I mean? And so I've carried that with me. And we did the transition with a blanket. Like they would let me go under a blanket. And that was kind of my, okay, let's get into Carly mode. We took the blanket off. We were in that world and then put the blanket back on and we're back to regular life and everything is fine. And I'm not overdosing on aerosol.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Wow, that's good to have a process. I'm really glad that you did that. I do have a question, like from like a who is the lady? Who is that lady? Who's that lady?
So there's a character in the film that you all just saw that is Carly's imaginary friend. We don't name her in the movie, but in the script she's called Spirit Woman, and she's played by artist and musician Mo Kenny. And that character, I obviously the first time we see her, it's from a drug hallucination. So that's sort of where she comes from. But then she just sort of starts following Carly around and being a bad influence on her. So every time I would write that character, I would pretend that that was the id, like the Freudian, like id, ego, super ego. So I would just be like, okay, what does Carly's id want right now? And then that would be the kind of metaphor for her id pushing her into that direction. And then, you know, one of the big themes when writing the script was responsibility. So when Carly kind of decides in Act 3 that she wants to take responsibility and like get rid of this bad influence, she can then just get rid of it because it was, you know, it was her the whole time. It was in her the whole time, really.
And that was always her. It was a weird lady.
Yeah. And that was Mo Kenny's never acted before, but I just really am a fan of hers and I really liked her look. And I was like, hey, you want to be a bad influence kind of imaginary friend character in this movie I'm making? She's like, yeah.
Wild to me
Cool.
that she's like the only woman or like older woman who seemed to have any level of authority, like visually or within the story. And she's imaginary because everybody's just like making decisions with their tingly bit and getting high.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that's true.
There's like a couple of scenes in it where moms like say I'm such a bad mother that actually got me like in tears. Like it literally, like
Oh,
sometimes
that's
you
good.
don't hear, some people have difficult relationships with their mothers. I think that that's not necessarily explored from a feminist, from a female lens very often. And I think this was done very beautifully, but there was some painful moments for sure that
Yeah.
were executed very well.
Thank you for saying that. I certainly really enjoy that. One of my favorite scenes is the scene in towards the end where Carly's talking to her mother and her mother is so upset. And I wrote it so that it sort of feels like, oh my God, she's so upset that she let her daughter down and she was a bad mother. And then you realize she's upset that people are talking about her. You know, like she's not even upset about the right thing. And then Carly, with the compassion that Carly has, instead of like getting your back up about that, which I would do, like this has nothing to do with you, why are you making this about you, mom? You know, like it's insane. But Carly like has the compassion of being like, um it's okay, you know. And then she's really the adult that comforts mom. It's, yeah, it's a good scene. I'm glad that you felt something there because I really like that scene.
It's a real cycle of addiction. It's like it's about generations of women and their pain too, I think. Like whether that's directly the intention, but I think that's something that I don't know if you can agree, everyone can agree with this, is that like we carry the traumas and experiences of our mothers through us. Uh and it seems like both of those women are doomed to repeat the lives that their mothers warned them against, that they have themselves. So
Mhm.
it's a
Well
bummer. It's
said.
a horror movie, bro. It is.
Yeah, it's kind of sad. It's a sad movie.
It's shot like the cinematography and the score is just fantastic. I'm trying to like
Mhm.
anticipate in advance what an audience would ask for, and I know that a lot of the attendees of this festival, not a lot, but some are aspiring filmmakers, actors in themselves. So if we could just for a moment, starting with, sorry that to be like hogging your spotlight with Stephanie, but like, is there like a quick way you could talk to us about your funding journey?
Oh yeah, sure.
Like
Uh,
from creation
yeah.
to funding the project?
Yeah, so the experience I have as a filmmaker before making Night Blooms has been, I started in the world of directing music videos for the band I used to play in, not the shitty high school one, but a real band that I was actually in my 20s. And then some short films, and then I did some documentary work. So that was the kind of journey up until this. And I really wanted to apply to Telefilm Canada for some funding for what will be, my first dramatic feature. And so I approached Shut Up in Color, which is a production company here, Mark Tetro and Jason Levangie, and I asked them if they would produce this film. And I have this idea for the script, and let's get the application in as soon as Telefilm opens up the application. And we did, and we got lucky, and we got that funding. So it's still a low budget movie. It's low budget and scrappy, but it's grateful for any funding anytime we can get it.
Where did you shoot?
We shot in Nova Scotia, so it's in across the bridge from Halifax and Dartmouth. Specifically, Woodside is the area that we shot in most of it, all of it.
Oh yeah, familiar territory. I could throw a rock to here from here. uh but okay, so I know, Jessica, you probably get this question, like, am I calling you Jessica and you don't like being called Jessica? Do you prefer Jessica or Jess?
Whichever one, whichever one you want. Jessica's my real name. I said Jess because we're friends now.
Oh, wonderful. Well, Jess, wonderful, Jess. I know you probably get asked this question a lot because you have a very storied career for your young age. But what was your acting journey? Your journey into acting and your process there. I said process a lot.
Like in general?
Yeah, like what was your what brought you to it, and what was
Yeah.
your trajectory?
Yeah. I started in musical theater. Yeah. So my mom was a music teacher, and my dad is a theater tech teacher. So I had really no choice but to like go to, theater summer schools. And I did. And when I was 7, I got to play young Cosette in Les Mis, and the director was like, you should probably get an agent if you want to keep doing this. And so I did, and then that agent sent me out for a JCPenney commercial, and that was my first ever film experience, and I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do forever and ever. Yeah, and I'm still with that same agent now. It's been, I think, 14 years. So she like got me started and everything, and now we're doing some fun stuff together.
Again, we have very little time left. If there's anything that I missed, because I realize I bogarted this conversation with like gushing over this film and your performance and this entire project, but is there anything you'd like to impart on others?
Yeah, so like one of my favorite parts about doing this was, first of all, because we were using like natural lighting, and we didn't have to spend a million hours setting up shots. We could work with Steph for like 10-15 minutes and actually like run through the scenes and stuff before we filmed. It was amazing. And so something that we did with the scenes with Carly and Wayne, and I think some other scenes as well that just involved the two of them, like even with Laura and Carly, was we would do 2 versions of each scene. One where we're rooting for Carly, and one where we're rooting for Wayne a little bit more, so that it was almost like choose your own adventure, I guess, for the editor, so that you could find that kind of gray area. Because I think, given the situation, a lot of people might see black and white Wayne as the bad guy because he's a man and he's older. And so I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Steph, but I think that there were a couple of the shots that we used that Carly was like looked worse than him, to even it out. Yeah. And then I'm sure that it teetered a little bit, but just to like keep it in that gray area, we would do it and be like, okay, we want to hate you in this take, and now this time you can be softer. And it was a lot of fun to play with.
Yeah, that was really important to me, that a lot of the choices moving into shooting this film, because me and my DP prepped for about a year before we started shooting, and that's like unpaid, just us when we had time, because we really wanted to get it right. And we did 3 different test shoots before we even had anyone cast. We just got friends of mine to be in the scene so that we could figure out what are we going to have, how are we going to cover this, what lenses should we use. So that was like, a year leading up to before we shot. And then we ultimately, going through that process, we landed on day 1 having a lot of stuff figured out that I think a lot of filmmakers don't have the luxury to know on day 1. And that's like some technical stuff, and I hope I don't bore too many people, but technical stuff, like I knew that I liked a 50mm lens the best, so that's almost every shot is shot on a 50mm. And I wanted a lot of available light, as Jess just mentioned, instead of, sort of like for those filmmaker people watching. So instead of, taking 45 minutes to turn your camera around and set up a bunch of lights to make that shot really pretty, and then you bring the actors in and then you shoot. And because, it's a low budget movie and it's a Canadian movie, it is just like, okay, well, we only, we got to move on. We can do 2 takes. Okay, that's good. You out, we got to light this next scene. Like, that's often how film sets feel. And I didn't want that. And of course, I didn't have the luxury of just shooting for 30 days straight or whatever. So what we ended up sort of sacrificing was we're not going to have any time to light. We're going to use available lighting. So that means whatever was coming through the window that day, whatever lamps were nearby, and then we move a lamp in here, and that's how we light the scene, and then we go. And like Jess said, we had time to do a lot of takes and really work through the scene, because that time wasn't spent in other more traditional ways of spending that time. But that sounds a little easier than maybe it was to pull off, because like in theory, I was like, great, let's just do that. How come everyone doesn't film that way? Well, the reason why is because it is a nightmare to schedule. Like, I'm talking, we would location scout, and we're going to be like, okay, so on this day, in order to get this scene, we have to shoot in the living room of Carly's house between 3 and 4:30 p.m. So like that's how we scheduled pretty much the whole shoot. It was all based on where the sun would be on that day.
And
So it was a bit of a nightmare for our first AD, and I'm really surprised Nicole Close was our first AD. I'm really surprised she didn't quit. But we spent all that time prepping that way, and I really think that helped the movie. Because when we were in there, it was like, oh, okay, thank God we have time. We have time. We have an hour and a half in this location because the sun is working right now. And let's just like roll. And like Jess said, get those different options of like, let's get an option where like we really hate you. Let's get an option where we really hate him or whatever.
I think it comes off beautifully in the piece. And I mean, it's ridiculous to have shot that way when, especially like currently being based in Halifax. It never is sunny here.
No, I mean, that's great though. When it was overcast, we had way more wiggle room, but we had to prepare as if it was going to be sunny every day, because that's where we had a more narrow idea of where we could shoot. You know what I mean? Like we were always shooting against the sun. So the sun was coming this way. We could only shoot the scene this way. And that's only going to last for an hour or an hour and a half.
So you did the reverse of what Stanley Kubrick did in Eyes Wide Shut, where he did like 74 billion takes, but only used like Christmas lighting and natural lighting. You did it like very specifically, but I think that's why it has that tone to it, that feeling to it, that same like just kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Not gritty, but just kind of you're in the murk. Like
thank you. That's exactly what I want. Thank you. That's exactly what I was trying to do. Yeah, I wanted it to look gritty and rough and raw. And because we don't have all these lights set up everywhere, instead of doing traditional coverage where it's like here's a wide shot and here's a close up and here's the other angle, and instead of having to do that, because if you go too far this way, you'll see a light stand, we were able to move the camera. We move with characters and we follow someone's hand going down and coming back up. And we were able to do that because there wasn't a bunch of gear in the way. So I think that also helps kind of feel like earlier, Meg, when you were saying like you feel the safety pin going in the ear. I feel like because when we follow and we're really with people, instead of like cut to a wide, cut to a close, cut to it, that really feels like we're in there. Like our eyes are watching them rather than, you know what I mean? It feels more natural. It feels like you're there in the room with them.
And I think it was well done. I think my last question for Jess will be, what was your reaction? I guess you can expand more on what was your reaction in seeing the film the first time, given how many different ways you shot it?
Well, it was just like a second ago. When we were talking about doing this Q&A, Jess was like, can I see the movie before we do the Q&A? And I was like, oh, you haven't seen it yet?
Oh
like,
no.
No. And I was like, oh no. And like I don't mean a second ago, but I mean like a couple days ago. Like it wasn't long ago that she watched it for the first time.
Yeah.
And then I forget because I've been watching it over and over hundreds and hundreds of times for the last 2 years in editing and then in color and in sound design. And it's like I've watched it so much. I never ever have to watch this movie again. And I forget that the actors haven't even seen it.
No, I thought that the first time I was going to watch it was when we went to the screening in Vancouver in front of people. And I was like, okay, I'm going to prepare myself to watch this for the first time in front of people and cover up whatever I'm feeling. And then you sent it to me and I was like, okay, I'm going to sit by myself. And I remember when you sent it to me, I had something to do in like 20 minutes. And so I would just like skim parts of it. And then I would get so into it that I was like, okay, I gotta go. And so I was so excited to watch it that night. And I think actors always kind of say, it's like, it's hard to watch myself and it's weird. I feel like it had been enough time that I like forgot parts of it that I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot about this scene. This is amazing. And because Carly is so different than me, I was actually, I found it easy to watch. Like I found, and I also, I don't know, I think I look younger in it because it's been, 2 years maybe? So I actually like, I was able to kind of dissociate and just watch it as like an audience member. And I think I watched it like 6 times since, and I like it like better and better each time. And I love watching it with different people and seeing their reactions, because people have very different opinions and different than I think that they're going to have. Like I watched it with my partner's moms and I was like, okay, this is going to be awkward and interesting, because it's always, you're watching that with like family, and she hated Wayne. Like right off the bat, she decided that that's the bad guy, and like kind of continued with that the whole movie. But then I would watch it with like a group of guys who at the beginning I think felt guilty for not hating Wayne, and then like would try to sway and be on Carly's side, but then in the hospital scene they were like, no, I hate you, like there's no way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was so much fun. So I'm still into it every time that I watch it, but I kind of like watching the people around me watch it even more.
Yeah, the thing that you just said, Jess, about how we were filming it in different ways, like kind of doing different takes where we were leaning more in one side or the other. I think that was so important to do, because even at the script stage, I could tell the few people I was sending the script to had like vastly different opinions.
Yeah.
And not to stereotype, but the men who read the script were like, oh, I get why he slept with her. And the women who read it were like, no, that's just like, he should never have. And I was like, wow, like what a different
Yeah.
And I was amazed at how drastic these opinions were. And I was like, oh, I'm doing something right, I guess. I've made the characters complex enough that you can, depending on your life experience or your opinion, maybe, see it from two perspectives. So I think that was very important to do those takes in those different ways. But in editing, I think almost every time we had the chance, almost every time we had the choice, I think we put in the pro Wayne scenes. Because
I noticed
generally, if we were going to put any, like, we had some takes where Nick Stahl, who plays Wayne, is really angry at her. He's like, you fucked up my life. Like, he's really angry. And we went with the softest version in the movie, because I thought we're pretty much against him most of the time. So if we're going to make him too angry and too resentful, then it's like we're just pushing it way over to okay, he's the villain. So we took almost every version of the takes where Carly was the shittiest, just to give it a little bit more balance on that side.
It came across that way, and I would love. I hope one day there's a day where we can all watch it together, and we can all watch other people watch what we just saw.
Yeah.
Also just watched it today. It's very, very good. Because like I was looking at stuff for it online, and the log line says that it is about a young woman who navigates a relationship with her friend's dad, but like that's not true. Right? Because the relationship doesn't even start until like an hour in.
It's hard to like tell people what
no, that's true.
About. I'll be like, you have to watch it. I can't tell you what it's about, because then you have this idea already that it's like that it's her doing it or that it's him doing it, right? You just have to watch it.
Yeah, the log line and the synopsis is a little weird for this one, for sure, because you can write it in several ways. You can be like, when anyone asks, I just say it's a gritty coming of age story about teenage girls in the 90s. That's what I say when asked. But yeah, it does seem weird to be like, oh, also there's an affair with, like that's obviously a big part of the story, but there's also like oh, she has an imaginary friend played by Mo Kenny. You may have heard of her. Like, she follows her around and she wears like this floral suit that we had, specially made. It's there's also a lot of flowers in there, hence the movie title Night Blooms, and the flowers represent, sexual coming of sexual age. Like, there's lots of stuff. Hopefully it doesn't feel like there's lots of stuff in a bad way, like, oh, the movie's all over the place. I think it probably feels like it's all thematically connected.
Could also
it is. It's a weird synopsis to come up with.
The synopsis could just be girl huffs aerosol.
Have you thought of getting high off homemade product? Air freshener is one of the things you might be able to get high off of. Come see this movie and learn how.
Among the things you get high off, I did love the moment where she comes back from being super high off of aerosol, and like her friend's like, "Oh, you smell like lavender."
Yeah, well, I was one of those teenagers, like, not that I'm proud of it, but I got high off of whatever I could find in the house. Like, and this was pre-internet, right? So it would just be your friends being like, "Did you know that you could smoke?" And we would just come up with, like, we just hear stuff, go, "Really?" And try to smoke like crazy stuff that would probably should have killed us, you know. And I look back and I'm like, why did I get high? Why did I try to get high off of all those things? It's crazy. But anyway, if I did that in small town Nova Scotia in the 90s, I'm like, someone else must have been doing that. So I wrote
Oh,
it the movie thinking someone will be able to relate to this, you know, crazy stuff that we did.
I mean, I said I related to it for a reason.
Yeah.
Like, well, I think I'm getting
Yes,
the light here. So
thank you.
thank you so much for your work. And this is you're both brilliant talents, and a very blessed to be able to speak with you today. And thank you for being part of the festival. Do you have anything to plug? You want to plug, or we can find you, or
Oh, yeah, I mean, you can definitely find us all on the internet. And social media, you know, Night Blooms has social media you can follow and tell your friends about. Um, but yeah, no, I mean, personally, I have stuff I'm developing, but nothing I can send you to go see or buy right now. What are you doing, Jess?
Yeah, this. I'm writing and opening a bar right now.
oh,
Yeah.
where is this bar?
I know. Can we plug the
Dundas.
bar yet, or is it not like officially?
No, not until the summer, but like yeah, my first time ever trying to like own something in Dundas, Ontario. So that's where my focus is right now. And then this is if I have friends over, I'm like, do you want to watch Night Bloom? This is what we do.
That's wonderful.
I probably should have told you don't show this. When I sent you the link, I probably should have been like, don't show it to anyone. Now you're like, everyone I know have seen it. What are you
Watch
talking
Night
about?
Blooms? Don't worry, I don't have that many friends.
Yeah, that's okay. I also not that worried.
Thank you again for everything. We'll stalk you on the internet and and follow your careers closely, as this is a beginning of a beautiful trajectory for both of you. I can tell.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Meg.
Thank
This is really
you.
fun.